Welcome, everybody, to the SNN.Network Canada virtual event. I'm your host, Robert Kraft, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our first keynote of the day, fellow lead sponsor of the event from SmallCap Discoveries, the inimitable, the Paul Andreola. Paul, take it away.
Thank you, Bobby. Hello, everyone. As Bobby said, my name is Paul Andreola, and I'm the editor of Small Cap Discoveries, an investment newsletter dedicated to highlighting some of the great Canadian listed micro and nano cap companies. And I want to thank you all for joining us today. I think Bobby and his team at SNN.Network have put together a fantastic lineup of companies, as well as some great expert speakers in different segments of the Canadian investing landscape. And I'm really pleased to see a broad range of companies from a number of different industries. So everything from mining and oil and gas to life science and technologies. And I personally want to thank Bobby for the opportunity to speak today. Now, I'm quite passionate about investing in the Canadian public market. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about why I believe that looking for and investing in high quality Canadian microcap companies can be extremely financially rewarding, and how investors can benefit by discovering the undiscovered. Now, you may have seen the research or even read the book, What Works on Wall Street by James O'Shaughnessy. You'll know that high quality, smaller companies and their stocks over time outperform large stocks. And I believe in Canada, small investors who are willing to do the work can add additional advantages when building out their portfolios. Now, I tell investors it only takes one stock to change your financial life, but that one stock is rarely sitting there in plain sight. You need to look where it's a little harder to find, away from the crowds. And I believe in Canada, you certainly get that opportunity. Now, I've been researching investing in the Canadian microcaps for over 30 years. I've worked in the investment industry, having spent about 10 years as a stockbroker. I've helped to bring several companies public via the Canadian exchanges, and I've been part of a public company management team and even sat on the board of several Canadian listed companies. And I now personally invest almost exclusively in the Canadian listed microcap company space. Now, I believe I've come to learn a lot about what, in my opinion, makes the Canadian microcap market some of the best hunting grounds for investors who are willing to do the hard work to find some of these somewhat undiscovered gems. I've seen many investors find Canadian stocks that have returned many multiples of their original investments and changed their financial lives. And yes, I'm talking about those, famous and elusive multi-baggers. I know this because I'm one of those investors. In early 2013, I found a little oddball company by combing through financial filings in Canada. Now, this company was profitable, it was growing nicely, and appeared quite cheap. There was no analyst coverage, no media coverage, no investor relations programs, nothing. None of my colleagues or friends had ever heard of it. It was just sitting there. This little TSX venture listed company based in San Antonio, Texas, and it was trading around 17 cents a share. This company was an undiscovered and underfollowed company. I bought some shares. Before I go on about that, let's get past a few basics about investing in the public markets in Canada. There are three main stock exchanges in Canada: the TSX, the TSXV, and the CSE. The TSX is Canada's senior exchange where most of Canada's largest companies are listed. Then we have the TSX Venture and the CSE, where the majority of Canada's smaller companies are listed. Now, I'll refer to these last two exchanges as Canada's public venture capital markets. 2020 was a strong year for the Canadian exchanges. Canada's large cap TSX grew by 17%, which was in line with the larger US indexes, such as the S&P 500, which grew 15%, or even the Russell 2000, which grew 18.5%. But the two Canadian venture exchanges saw some of the strongest growth of any international exchanges in the world. The TSX Venture Index rose by 50.5% in 2020, and the smaller CSE grew by an even stronger 71.5%. Now think about that, an index that was up over 70% in 1 year. Small life science, technology, and ESG companies led the way. Now, there are approximately 3,900 publicly listed companies in Canada. Roughly 800 of those 3,900 listings are exchange traded funds, leaving approximately 3,100 companies to choose from. And of this number, around 2,300 are listed and trade on the TSXV and the CSE, those Canadian public venture markets that I spoke of. The vast majority of these companies have a market cap of less than 50 million. Now let's take a look at the TSX Venture. In the last 3 quarters of the year, there were 77 new listings, a 27% drop from the same period in 2019. Equity financings, however, in dollar terms, grew by 45% to 4.6 billion. And the average size of financings on the TSXV was 3.3 million. Now, the CSE also had a strong first 3 quarters of 2020. That exchange welcomed 67 new listings and set records for the number of equity financings. Approximately 2.5 billion was raised versus the 2.4 billion in the same period in 2019, and the average size of financings in the CSE was roughly 2.8 million. Now, the Canadian public venture markets exist for the most part to finance startups and for growth capital. Now, the predecessor to the TSXV, the Vancouver Stock Exchange, originally came into existence to finance the various gold rushes and dreams of prospectors and miners who promised to make investors wealthy beyond their wildest imaginations. And not surprisingly, the majority of companies on the TSX Venture Exchange today, roughly 58%, are mineral exploration and development companies. Just like in the days of the old Yukon gold rush, today's prospectors and miners continue to offer the promise of great riches. Now, Canada is still internationally known as a country rich in natural resources. Oil, lumber, and mineral extraction has historically been the driver of a large part of the Canadian economy. Yet Canada has a very diverse and thriving economy that is not solely dependent on resource extraction industries. While we do have world-class companies in these sectors, we are no longer just miners of rocks and hewers of wood. And herein lies one of the interesting dynamics that I believe increases and improves the opportunity for savvy investors. In Canada, there's a significant amount of emphasis on the financing of resource exploration projects. The TSX Venture Exchange finances more junior mineral exploration than any other exchange in the world. Of the 4.6 billion in equity financings in the first 9 months of the year, 3.1 billion, or roughly 67%, went to mining companies. Most large and small brokerage firms in Canada have at least one full-time mining analyst on staff, and a good portion of financing revenues generated at these firms will come from the IPOs and the secondary financings of mining and oil and gas exploration. Many large firms will have several analysts covering different segments of the mining and oil and gas industry. The investment newsletter industry in Canada is dominated by dozens of mining and investment experts. And investment journals and websites that cater to the mining sector outnumber all the other sectors by a wide margin. Add these together, and the promotion and financing of the mining sector is an industry unto itself and grabs an amazing amount of investor attention, especially in the microcap space. Now, you'd be surprised at how few resources brokerage firms have been dedicating to the non-resource space or for the small or nano-cap space. For certain, it has been growing over the past few years, and we do now see a few sector specialists covering industries such as life science and technologies. But most will fall into the special situation analyst category, and still many of these are dedicated to the larger companies in the sector and companies listed internationally. If you are a sub $50 million market cap life science or technology company in Canada, you're unlikely to show up on almost any analyst radar screens. Less experts paying attention likely means more mispricing and more opportunity for the retail investor. Savvy investors need to be willing to look at small, undiscovered, underfollowed, and undercovered stocks to find the biggest winners. So herein lies the opportunity for a microcap investor, one who is willing to look at the ignored sectors and companies that are building and growing their businesses far away from all the noise generated by the financial media covering larger companies and the traditional mining finance industry in Canada. Many of the smaller non-resource companies in Canada, in my opinion, are some of the most undiscovered situations, offering some amazing mispricing opportunities. My investing experience has proven to me that the Canadian microcap sector is a treasure hunter's dream. Many of these microcap companies, in my opinion, appear to be extremely underfollowed and unrecognized by the North American and international investment community. Maybe it's because these microcaps are poorly understood. Maybe few investors know how to find them or how to research them. Or maybe most investors are a bit too lazy and prefer to keep taking advice from an industry that has little to gain by recommending microcap companies. Now, quite likely it's a mixture of all these things. The typical retail investor and broker just don't seem to want to do the necessary work to uncover these little buckets of gold. Again, less competitors for savvy investors. Now, there are a growing number of great Canadian listed larger cap companies, and most of them, like everywhere else in the world, began as small companies. From telecom to software to biotech and more, it's all here in Canada. Many of these Canadian companies access public markets for early stage funding, unlike the typical route in the US and other parts of the world, where private venture capital appears to be more available and abundant. The private venture capital market in Canada is nowhere near as mature as that in the US. Many of Canada's future industry titans will get their start in the TSXV and the CSC. There have been many companies originally listed on the Canadian venture exchanges that have gone on to senior exchange listings, such as the TSX and NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. There's no reason this will not continue. Now, it's no secret that many US venture capital-backed companies are waiting longer before going public. Now, it has made it more difficult for smaller retail investors to be able to participate in the early stages of some of the great growth companies of the past decade. In Canada, you still can. There are dozens and dozens of great little profitable and growing microcap companies listed in Canada that deserve greater attention from international investors, and especially those investors south of the border. Now, earlier I mentioned a little undiscovered company that I found and invested in. The name of that company is Expel Technologies, and while I currently don't own it, it was that one stock that changed my financial life. That tiny oddball TSXV listed company that I was buying at 17 cents a few years ago now trades on NASDAQ at roughly $51, $52 per share. Yes, $51, $52 per share. So I personally owe a lot to the Canadian public venture markets. Now, I hope I've encouraged you to take a better look at what the Canadian markets have to offer to a microcap investor. There's plenty of treasure to be discovered up here. You just have to know where and how to look. This conference is a great way to be introduced to some new and interesting opportunities. Now, again, I think the team at SNN put together a fantastic lineup of remarkably diverse companies in a number of different sectors. Now, I hope you enjoy the conference, and I hope that one day you find that one stock that changes your financial life. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And where can everybody go and find more information about you and Small Cap Discoveries?
Anybody can go to smallcapdiscoveries.com or contact me at paul@smallcapdiscoveries.com.
Very good. All right. Well, Paul, thank you so much. And all right, everybody, get after it. You got a full 2 days. I hope you cleared the schedule. Let's go. So, Paul, thank you again.
Very welcome. Thanks, Bobby.